Hi everyone, this is Riza with Full Awakening, and I'm here to introduce a new project that we're doing called Stories of Awakening. This has been a hope and an inspiration for a long time, actually longer than the company Full Awakening has been around. I have been so inspired by reading and watching movies about people's journeys. In my younger years, I was obsessed with reading stories of amazing artists or other shamans and healers and how their path sort of took a veer at some point. Some big thing happened that was unexpected that took them in an unexpected direction. I was really fascinated by the stories of Central American shamans and how they started their initiation process, and really interesting in balancing the stories of the men and the women and the levels of resistance that they put up to having their reality broken, basically. My own story is what I'm going to talk about today, because in the coming months, I'm going to pair with other practitioners and artists and healers and people in all walks of life who have had an awakening experience. And I feel like having a conversation about those experiences will bring up some more of my experiences, and you guys will get to know me better. But more importantly, it'll be a conversation about where we started, what's happened to us that was unexpected or out of our hands, and where that has led us to direct our efforts and our focus. I'm really excited about this also because it's a cross-pollination experience. So when I'm able to speak with another person, I'm able to speak to their audience and they're able to speak to you guys. And we're able to see that this web of connectivity that connects us, this ability for us to feel our passion and follow the path and have unexpected twists and turns that clarify the intention that we came here on earth with, that is something that is for all of us. And it's not just for one kind of practitioner or one kind of person or one kind of artist. It's for everyone. And whether we answer that call or not, whether we decide to move forward into unknown territory is up to us individually. We all have that choice. But certainly these experiences can broaden our perspective of what is possible in a human life and in a human journey. So every time, we're part of a collective, we're one consciousness in some ways, evolving many different facets of possibilities. But as soon as we hear about one person's passionate turn in a direction that opened their hearts, we know that there's more possible for us as well. And we might take those kind of strange experiences that we've had, that we've put in the closet for a while and we kind of haven't talked about or thought about. We might bring those out and think, maybe that was actually my guidance or my connection with my higher self kind of ushering me into a slightly different path. Because the truth is, to be human, all of us have had to come up with an idea of what reality is. And mostly we've inherited that from our families, from our cultures, from the society in which we live, from our schools, from our friend groups, from the microclimate of whatever profession we've chosen. We're constantly constructing reality. But reality is not a fixed point. And you can look around the world and look at all these different cultures and all these different families and see that everyone's got their own sort of idea about what reality is. So for me, Stories of Awakening those are the stories that kind of break through our reality and have us go into an ungrounded reconfiguration stage. And that is an incredibly scary thing to experience. But in my own life, I, in retrospect, really appreciate those times. And the more that it's happened to me, the more times I've broken through my own reality and had to go through a reconstruction period, the more I learn about myself, and the more I learn about my resiliency, and the more I learn about my missionhood. And so I'm really, really grateful for those times. And because I've done them so many times, I'm getting a little bit better at maneuvering that groundless feeling of not knowing what reality is or not knowing what my part is to play. So let's start. Let's see. One of the things I love about sharing stories is that the more times that we share stories with the intention of releasing them, the less and less they become personal to us. So these stories lose the charge, they lose the very personalized effect that they had on us, and they become our shared story. So the two stories that I've been called to share with you today are stories that I've told many times because they're big stories, and they're good for me to share here, but I also am aware that these stories no longer hold the same personal charge that they used to. I feel like they've become a part of this personhood that I'm in right now. It's become a part of what I give to the public. And so I hope that these stories are exciting and fun to listen to, but also help to sort of illuminate some of your own path and some of the things that you have experienced or have been fearful of experiencing, and what is potential on the path. So I would say my life began, I was a farm girl, which a lot of people actually don't know about me. I grew up for my first 4 years on a farm, an 80-acre farm in rural Wisconsin. So I was born in the city of Chicago, but my family already owned this farm in Wisconsin, and that is where I spent my first 4 years of life. And I remember those first 4 years in a lot of ways as being, I was very aware very early on. I have memories from being an infant, and I remember having a lot of pre-word feelings, being able to remember the sensation of sun on my skin, or the texture of my parents' tapestry blanket, or the look of the tulips that grew on the right side of the house, and the feeling of rubbing the petals against my skin, or the interaction I would have with the cows that grazed on our land, or the woodland walks that I would take with my mom. My mom is a painter and an artist, and she used to take me on these amazing walks, and watching her paint also was an amazing early life memory. So there's many sensorial, rich, connective energies I had up until the age of 4. Now, at 4, my family went through a big traumatic shift, and my parents split up, and we also moved from the farm to the city. So we moved to Chicago, into very center of downtown, into a high rise. And that shift was fairly traumatic on my young psyche. It was also the first time I really got to know other kids. I was going to a preschool in the inner city and getting exposed to city kids. And so in a lot of ways, that sort of open-hearted, connective, awe-soaking, just the magic child in me started to die at that point. The magic child, I could say, went into hibernation when I was 4 years old. And throughout the trauma of what ensued in the next from 4 until 10, basically, I would say, there was a lot of shifting. My parents got divorced. I was an only child, so I didn't have any siblings to share that experience with, but we ended up moving a lot. So both of my parents moved quite a bit in the years that followed, and my life was very ungrounded and unsure in many ways. And I started to become a really cynical, sort of depressed child. It's hard to imagine being depressed at such a young age, but when I look back, I was really depressed and sort of separate from life. I felt separate from the magic of life, separate from the awe or the celebration of life that I had experienced in my early years. And certainly I was separate from nature in many ways. Chicago is a very expansive and concrete and brick and glass city. And because it's so flat there as well, I mean, it's the 5th largest city in North America, but because it's so flat, whenever you're on a rise of any kind, like on a highway, and you look out, you just see humanity in every direction. There's no real nature. There's Lake Michigan, but I think the loss of that connection with nature was really, really felt in my heart and my soul. And it's something that now as an adult, as I've gone through my shamanic practice and my initiations, I feel like my connection with nature is what connects me to life. And so living in the Pacific Northwest for over a decade and really coming back to that magical child that I had lost or had gone into hibernation at such an early age. So the reason I tell you all of this is to sort of set you up for what happened to me when I was 10, which was my first true initiation with spirit. I had come at that point to be a very intelligent, very pragmatic and cynical child. I didn't believe in magic of any kind. I didn't believe in religion of any kind. I had rejected Catholicism and Christianity that both my parents were raised in. I refused to go to church. I had some very, very strong hardwiring against any sort of organized spiritual practice. I mostly just didn't believe in anything outside of what my eyeballs could see. Right? I was a very literal, pragmatic, scientific child. And I liked what could be proven, and I liked what could be taught in schools, and I liked the rigidity of it. It was comforting to me. And so when I was 10 years old, we were living at that time in a house that was I would say it was old and kind of haunted feeling, right? For someone who didn't really believe in ghosts or spirits, it had kind of a, it was an apartment that had been around for over 100 years, and the history of it was imbued even in the structure of the apartment. So in the back was sort of, we always entered through the back, but the back was really like the kitchen and like the maid's quarters. Even though it wasn't an apartment that was lavish in any way, it did have that sort of separation of the formality of the front of the house and the informality or sort of servant quarters of the back of the house. And so the apartment was kind of split in that way. And we mostly found ourselves living in the part of the apartment that was, the maid's quarters. That was our kitchen and our like informal living room. And my stepfather had an office back in the maid's bedroom, and there was like an extra little bathroom that we did projects in. And the front of the apartment was the 2 bedrooms connected by a Jack and Jill bathroom. So Jack and Jill bathroom usually has a door to each bedroom. Basically, you can enter from both sides. This bathroom had the addition of having a door that went to the hallway, which was just super creepy to us. So we always had it blocked off with a dresser, a bookshelf of some sort. A bathroom with 3 doors is like very bad feng shui. I don't know, it's like terrible construction. So we had the 2 bedrooms, my parents' bedroom and my bedroom, or my mom and my stepfather's bedroom and my bedroom. And then we had this Jack and Jill bathroom and this long dark hallway that ran along the side, right? So there was a door to the bedroom, there was a blocked off door to the bathroom, and then around this corner, there was a door to my parents' bedroom. And then through this big arched way, there was an opening to the formal dining room, or what may have been the formal dining room / living room, which was my mother's art studio. And that was right by the front door. So the front door had this, it was like here, I'm explaining this all because it'll come into play with this story. So there's this front door here that we never used, and this big archway, and then my parents' bedroom door here, and then a closet door across, right? And the closet door had a full-length mirror on it. And this apartment, again, is like from the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? And then there's this long, dark hallway that ran through the center of the apartment. And the long, dark hallway, for whatever reason, had no lights at all. It was the darkest, like the kind of hallway that you walk down and you just get those creepy crawlies going up your back sort of feeling. No lights, and it had hardwood floors. The whole apartment was hardwood floors, so it was very slippery, right? And this is in the fall, sort of early winter time, and so we were wearing socks, and it was dark. And let's see, to preface this for a moment, I'll also say that this was the first time in my life I remember having recurring nightmares. So up until this point that this happened, I had been having 2 reoccurring nightmares over and over again. So every single night I had these 2 recurring nightmares. It made sleeping torturous for me. I really didn't enjoy it. The first nightmare was that I was in a place that was very similar to Camazotz in Wrinkle in Time, even though I'd never read that book. I didn't read that until my adulthood. But it's basically like a place where every house looked exactly alike, and every corner you turned was another row of houses that looked exactly alike. And in this dream, there were never any people there. I was always running from this sort of demonic energy. And at some point I would find a person, but that person would be vacant, and they would be sort of like a vacant human. And so there was never any help. It was a really scary place to be. And the second dream was being in that apartment that we lived in, and of being trapped in the bathroom with my family and barricading all the doors because there were these people coming in trying to kill us. Really, really scary, 2 very scary dreams, right? So that sort of prefaces this period of time. Anyway, so that particular night of my first break with reality, I was looking for my mother in the apartment. It was in the evening. The long, dark hallway was especially dark. And I was running down the hallway calling for Mom. And I didn't hear her. I didn't know where she was. Turns out she was in the bathroom. So she's like in the most insular part of the apartment, right? She couldn't hear me. And I'm calling for Mom, running down the hallway, and I'm getting that creepy crawly, sort of like something's chasing me feeling. A lot of fear, energy moving through my body. And I go to turn the corner, but I'm going at kind of a pace, right? So you know what that feels like on hardwood floors with socks. You're sort of like skating. I did sort of what is it called? The Tokyo drift around this corner. And all of a sudden there was this huge burst of light, like a flash of light. And I first registered it from my right side of my face. And it was like the headlights of a car on a dark night on a country road, like absolute darkness, and then just this flash of light. And so I froze because it was so unexpected. It wasn't at all what I thought was going to happen. And so I just froze. I went into freeze mode, which we know is one of the 5, fear responses. And then I realized the light was also coming from the left side of me. And so I turned, because what I realized, like kind of in this slow motion panicked place, was that flash of light on the right, as I turned the corner, was actually a reflection from that full-length mirror. And so I turned towards the left, and there was this white glowing figure standing in the corner of the room, reaching the whole span of ceiling to floor, which, I mean, the ceilings must have been at least 10 feet, maybe 11. I mean, they were very, very high ceilings. And this man, male-ish figure, was standing the full length like a pillar of light. And I have since seen those beings in my meditation and when I'm doing healing space, and I consider them pillars of light. That's what I call them. I've been told that they're called other things by other intuitives, but I call them pillar of light beings. And at the time, though, I must say, this scared the bejesus out of me. I got so frightened. And I just remember screaming and then just going completely, like the blood drained out of my body. And he was just, he was standing, he was not trying to harm me. There was nothing scary or like, freaky about him in any way. And he was almost emanating this feeling of like sadness and sorrow. But I had no framework to hold this experience, right? Like at this point, it's my dog scratching herself. At this point, being outside of any sort of spiritual community, there's ghosts, there's demons, and there's angels, right? Those are like the only things that, your ordinary American thinks about when they think of spirit, or things that are not in form, not in physical form. And this being was clearly not in physical form. I was seeing him with my physical eyes, but he was not, like I could tell he was not corporeal. Like there was no matter to him, but he was just this three-dimensional image and emanating a huge amount of white light. And so I screamed, I unfroze, I ran around the corner into my parents' bedroom, and from the bedroom into the bathroom, and there was my mom like brushing her teeth. And I was just like, green in the face, green and pale and freaked out. And my mom said, "What happened?" And I said, "I saw a ghost." And my mom looked at me in the eyes, and I expected her to say, what I wanted her to say was, "You must be really tired," or "You're probably just seeing things," or "It's okay, don't worry, like it's probably just your imagination." Something of that sort would have helped me to like hold my container of reality a little bit better. But what my mom said, she looked at me and she said, "I believe you." And that is not what I wanted to hear in that moment, right? And so I said, that's the wrong answer. That's the wrong answer. And then I didn't talk. I didn't want to talk. And so my mom put me in a bath and was trying to like ease me back into a sense of safety. Now this part of the memory I may have reconstructed, but I don't remember having those nightmares after this happened. Our focus became as a family largely how to protect ourselves from this ghost, right? Which is the way that that's the framework we had for there is a spirit in this house that is not corporeal. And, my parents, we never really prayed or had any sort of religious practices that were part of our home. But my stepfather, I remember, made a big cross, like a big Christian cross, and put it in that corner. And then we started praying every night at dinner and praying for all the lost souls. And, the response, my parents were very open and they were very accepting of what I had experienced. But the response did have a fear-based undertone. And I think that that's, very normal. I think that when something like this happens in a family and there isn't a culture in the family around like, "Oh yeah, Uncle Bob's always sitting on the couch and when we watch football," like, when there isn't a context for that, when it's not an accepted part of the culture in the family, then fear is absolutely automatically the first response. With the unfamiliar, right? So there was a fear-based response, and the story, it didn't happen again. I didn't see a spirit again, and for many years, and it became a fable. in some ways, or it became part of our family mythology. It was a good ghost story that we would tell years later when we were gathering with friends or family. And it was just like, ooh, this spooky thing happened this one time. Isn't this funny, right? But because it became a story, because it didn't happen again, because the response that I had and that we all had, I think, was pretty fear-based, it shut everything down, right? So we know that fear is something like, I've talked to a lot of my clients who say, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I think I was pretty intuitive. Like, I think I would have sort of feelings sometimes about things that were about to happen, but I'd have dreams that were premonitions, but it was really scary to me, and I just didn't want to know that stuff. Or I've had clients say, I used to hear voices, or I used to see people standing around my bed when I was going to bed at night, and it was terrifying for me. And I said, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. And then those visions started going away. So why I'm sharing that is just, I think that all of us have the capacity to some degree to have these sort of out of reality experiences or out of ordinary reality experiences. But I think often our fear is what sort of closes those gateways, right? Which is understandable and totally normal. And I think that that's one of the reasons that I do the work I do now, is because I like to teach people skills and how to hold their container and how to manage their space and how to set the vibration and the tone so that you can have really amazing experiences that can connect you with spirit, that can connect you with your counsel and with your light guidance and with your higher self and with source energy, that you can have that connection, and that can be an incredibly enriching part of your life, a part of your life in which you never feel alone, a part of your life in which you always feel like the answers that you need or the holding that you need or the compassion that you need is always at your fingertips because it's a part of your psyche. That is an amazing gift to have, and I think we all have that capacity to have that gift in whatever degree is important for us to have it for this lifetime. But I think that often fear and our misconceptions about what's out there and the oogie boogies and the dark energies and things to be scared of, I think those fears that we're fed right through our, like, we are addicted to feeling fear. And so we have all these scary movies and all this media that's like these ghost stories and these things that are super scary and possession and poltergeists and, things that really, like, we like that feeling. I've noticed that even as a mother and my kids in kids shows, even in kids shows, sometimes they push the fear button a little bit. And my little ones has said, oh, when I watched that show, I felt fear like rise up in my body, and I kind of liked how it felt. It kind of felt exciting. And I'm like, exactly, right? So all of us at this point have been exposed to things that frighten us, and we may consciously like or dislike that feeling, but it's there to sort of addict you to the feeling of fear. And the truth is that there's so much happening in this reality all the time that is beyond our physical perception of it. And our body in other ways is attuned to open, right? I have a feel, my sensation is that we have an internal ability for sight and we have an external ability to sight, and we can bridge those, right? So my internal ability to sight and my external ability to sight can start to communicate with each other. And so in my journey, in my path, I've experienced seeing beings of many different varieties in different ways, from very corporeal through my visual cortex, and more through my visioning creative imagination has been able to picture things out for me, take energetic vibration and create a picture, and everything in between, right? So this being was sort of in between in the sense that he wasn't corporeal. He wasn't presenting as like you or me, like a fully physicalized human being or fully physicalized being of non-human origin, but I was visually seeing him through my eyeballs. So there's many different ways that can go. Getting back to the story. So 6 years later, we were telling this story to some good friends in DC on a trip that we were taking. And every time we told this story, I would notice that my mom and my stepfather would look at each other and sort of share a glance and then like a silent little shake of the head. And then we'd go on with the story. And this time I wasn't going to let it slide. I was 16 years old. I felt very mature, and I felt able and willing to take whatever it was that they were sharing secretly with each other that they weren't sharing with me. So I kind of put them on the spot. I said, you guys, every single time we tell this story, you guys share a look, and then you don't say whatever it is that you are considering saying. And I'm getting kind of sick of it. Like, I'm 16, I can handle it. I can handle the truth. What is it? And basically what came out is that 2 months earlier, when my mom and stepfather were home alone, I was in California visiting my dad. My mom had been walking to her art studio, which was that front room right through that big archway. And she'd been walking to her art studio, and my mom is kind of a daydreamer, and so she was kind of thinking about her art probably, and she walked into a wall. Well, now there's no wall there. It's just an open archway and a door, right? And so she stopped, really surprised. She walked into this wall, and she looked up, and the very same being that I described was standing in front of her. She'd walked straight into him, which is fascinating. Again, right? He wasn't presenting as corporeal, but he was visually being seen through our eyeballs. And my mom felt him as an actual force, as solid as a wall that she could not walk through. And she got really frightened, and she'd never had an experience like that in her life before. And she ran to my stepfather, and instead of telling him what she'd experienced, because she was sure she was kind of going crazy, she just asked him to walk her back into her office, her studio. So he consented, and he did, and he didn't ask why. And so when it happened to me, what happened was she believed me because it had already happened to her. And then she told my stepfather, this is what happened to Riza, and this is why I believe her. This is what happened to me 2 months ago. And then she told him the story. So they had shared this information with each other, but for whatever reason had not shared it with me. And so when I heard this information at 16, the gates blew open again, right? Because I still had fear about the experience, but remember, fear had shut my gates back down, and then I could just make this story into some sort of part of my mythology. It didn't have to be real. It didn't have to be actualized. It didn't have to feel unsafe. But when I found this out, my curiosity overcame my fear. My curiosity about what I had experienced and what I could experience and what was potential got bigger. And so my fear lost a lot of power in that moment. And almost my outrage at like this information being withheld from me was also a little bit of what pushed me forward. So interestingly, right after I found that out, my gates were blown open and all manner of bizarre things started happening in my life. Like, all of the sort of regular things that people talk about, phones ringing and nobody being on the other line. Back when we had landlines, I don't know if that happens on cell phones as much, but paintings would fall off the wall when I was home alone. I would hear my mother's voice talking to me when I was in the shower, but no one was in the house. And, all manners of bizarre things were happening. And I can tell some of those stories at another time. But I'm going to share one more mini story of the idea is basically this left turn, right? Like what's happening when you're like, this is my path, and I'm proceeding along my path, and all of a sudden I get massively rerouted, which is really, I think, the result of most people's stories of awakening is a massive rerouting, a detour into the right direction. And they're also the stories that are the most fun to tell. So I have one more little story. I realize this is a long live feed. In our future episodes, so we're going to do this every month, but these future ones are going to be conversations between me and another person, and it will be pre-recorded, and we'll release it here on Facebook as well as on YouTube and on the website. Those episodes will probably be about 45 minutes long. So this is, a long live feed, and you're welcome to pause it and come back to it another time. So the second one, I entitled this story, The Burn. And this was my first healing initiation. So in my younger years, I was very ambitious. I guess I still am ambitious, but I was very ambitious and driven towards both performance. I was a ballet dancer for my first 10 years, and then immediately when I quit that because of a physical injury, I became an actress doing theater in high school. And I loved performance. I love the creation of live performance. I love the interplay between the audience and the performers. I love the creation of the reality that happens with the whole cast and crew. And I think that that's really in some ways where I learned shamanism, was through being able to enter in, bring the soul of another character into my body and allow that to express itself and allow myself to live life, at least while I was doing the play, with the ability to experience someone else's life and perspective and way through my physical body. It gave me a lot of information about what shamanism is about and creating a reality. I mean, really, that's what theater, which was my big love, theater is a lot about creating reality because of all that intention, all that focus, all that work, all that effort everybody in the crew and company are like faced inward towards this central goal of creating reality. And it's incredibly powerful, and it's something that all humans have the capacity for. And then you bring that to an audience, and that night that you perform it, the audience and the players and the crew and everybody is working together, right? And every time you perform it with a different audience, it's a different reality, because the audience is putting in their material too, their ability to focus, their ability to engage. So I loved, loved, loved theater. But my other love was science, and I was obsessed with science and obsessed with the human body, and really fascinated by the inner workings, biology and genetics. And I was, at 14 working at Northwestern University in the neurology lab doing experiments on melatonin, and by 15 was working in the Northwestern genetics lab as well, and I worked in both of those labs for a few years, and was really drawn towards being a doctor. But by the time I graduated from high school, I'd been in the hospital environment enough and in the clinical environment enough. I knew that I just didn't really feel like that would be the happiest life for me. And so when I went to college at Smith College that had a fantastic theater program and a great medical program, pre-med program, I decided to become a theater major. And I walked away from my dream of being a doctor, which was something that I had held since I was a small child. So I went full force into theater, and I'm so glad I did. I had an amazing experience, and I ended up working professionally in theater in New York. And I found a company that I absolutely was in love with called Collision Theory that was directed by Stephanie Gilman. And their process of how they created their plays was so stellar and so impeccable. And I just loved them, loved them. So I started interning for them and trying to court myself to them. And when I graduated from college, I finally got hired by them full-time to be their production stage manager and their rehearsal stage manager, which was a big job. And I was actually making money as a theater person in New York City, straight out of the gates. And it was amazing, and I was so honored. But by the time I did my last show with them, about like a year or so after I graduated, I was feeling like something else was calling me. So I was having this I remember sitting backstage with the director one night before we started the show and just saying, do you feel like you want to go to the desert, into a cave, and just meditate for a few months and just really figure things out? And she looked at me and she said, no, I don't ever have that feeling. And I was like, oh, I guess it's just me. I kind of really want to do that. I want to go to the desert and meditate in a cave. And she said, why do you have to go to the desert to do that? I don't know. That's just the image I get. I just see this mountain in the desert and myself in a cave. I have no idea. And she's like, okay. So around that time, I was getting a lot of job offers for the next year's season, and I kept turning them down, which was surprising to me. Being a accomplished stage manager in New York is a big task. It's a really hard job. It's probably the least creative job in theater. It wasn't my passion, certainly. My passion was acting and directing, but it was a great opportunity to work with an amazing company. And I just kept saying no to these stage managing gigs that kept coming up and saying, oh, I'm booked out for the rest of the season. I'm so sorry. Contact me next year. But I wasn't booked at all. I had a little money saved up that would last me a few months of rent, but I didn't have any plans. And so when I finished that show, I went back to school to visit some of my friends who were about to graduate, and I came back, and it was one night, maybe 2 nights after I'd gone back. It was about a week after we closed our last show. And I was cooking dinner. I was making salmon fillets, and my partner at the time was at a karate class, and it was pretty late at night, and I was getting dinner going. I was wearing my sweatpants, PJs, whatever, and I was cooking in a wok, and I'd heated up the oil, a good amount of oil in this wok, and I was going to fry this fish, and I rinsed off the fish, and I kind of patted it dry, and I went to go slip it into the wok, and the oil popped and hit my arm, and my reaction was to drop the fish, right? And so the fish dropped, and all the oil picked up like someone was holding it in their hands like this, and it just hovered above the pot, and it was completely this most slow motion, ridiculous, improbable occurrence, right? This is one of those detours into the right direction. So this oil picked up and it just hovered above the pot, and then all of a sudden I went, no, and it went straight towards me like a softball and hit me in the face. And it hit me right here. I had 13 individual sores I didn't know about this at first. It was so hot, it was like it was cold. I didn't even turn the stove off. I turned, it's a New York City apartment, so my bathroom was like literally 2 feet away. I turned and walked into the bathroom and looked at my face, and the skin on my face was falling down. And I was like, oh, I should turn off the stove. So I turned off the stove, and it turned out I had 13, the largest one was right here, but I had 13 individual splotches where the skin had fallen off on this part of my face and on this part of my nose and on my neck. And of course, this is the night that my partner decided to stay late and talk to people at class. So she didn't come home, and I was home by myself, and I just, as soon as I think I realized how bad it was, the pain started to come in, and it was incredibly painful, and I didn't know what to do. I'd never really had a burn like that. And so I wasn't, I was a fan of essential oils, but I knew nothing about them. My girlfriend was the one who knew a lot about essential oils, and we had a few in our medicine cabinet, and I instinctually took a washcloth and got it slightly damp and put lavender oil all over it, doused it in lavender oil, which the damp towel may or may not have been the best choice for an oil burn, and a second and third degree burn at that, but the lavender oil turned out to be really good instincts, because lavender oil, and this is good information for all of you to have, lavender oil is absolutely the best thing to put on a burn. It is, of course, antiseptic, antibacterial, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, but also lavender oil has been proven to like really speed up the recovery of a burn. So you can use that for sunburns or any kind of burn. So anyway, I doused this on this washcloth and held it up to my face and just started pacing the house, just in so much pain. And all I knew what to do was rudimentary Reiki, which I had received Reiki in college, but I was not Reiki initiated or certified. I didn't know how to do it necessarily, but I just started trying to pull the heat out of my face and put cold energy into my face. Out of pure desperation, I didn't know what else to do. So I'm pacing the house, pacing the house. Finally, I hear the front door of the building open, and I go to the doorway and I say, Stasia, my partner's name, Stasia, get up here right now. She's like, oh God, I'm in trouble for being so late. She comes upstairs, and I'm like, I need to go to the emergency room. And so I had these, of course, 13 open gaping sores on my face. And we go to the emergency room, and at this point, it's been about an hour and a half. By the time I'm through triage and I get seen by a doctor, it's been about an hour and a half since the burn had happened. And I've been doing nothing but Reiki and holding this washcloth of lavender oil up to my face. And of course, the washcloth is like hot by this point, right? Because it's just been soaking up the heat from my face. But my face still feels like it's actively on fire. And I'm just in so much pain. I can't even speak. Like, I can't fill out forms. I can't speak. I can't do anything. I just feel like if I open my mouth to speak, I'm going to start screaming uncontrollably. So the doctor comes in, and they put injections into my eyes so that my eyes won't blink. And they lay me down on this metal trough, and they tape this, those tubes that go up your nose for air in the hospital? They taped that to my forehead, which made me completely wig out because it felt really close to the burns. And they pumped saline into my eyes. And so the saline was just like flowing through my eyes and onto this trough. And I'm, again, still in my PJs, basically in sweatpants and a thermal shirt. And I'm just getting drenched in saline. And I'm in shock, so I'm like kind of shaking. So they give me all this morphine. They're trying to calm me down. And they do this IV, and they kind of botch the job. There's like blood everywhere. And it's just like, it is a horror scene, right? And, they assess that I have second and third degree burns on my face. And facial skin is very delicate skin. It doesn't heal like the rest of the body. And so they've called the burn ward in Manhattan. We're in Brooklyn. And they've set up a transport for me. And they're going to transport me later that evening, or later in the middle of the night, because at this point it's like, midnight. They're going to transfer me around 3 o'clock to the burn ward in Manhattan to heal, because they want me in a certain level of isolation. And, there's thought to be a lot of scar tissue that's coming from this experience, possibly grafting. So, I'm laying there, I've got saline going through my eyes, I'm like in a lot of pain still, and all I know how to do, again, is this rudimentary Reiki, where I'm just trying to pull the heat out and put cold energy in, just replace the hot with cool, and just try to soothe my own pain. And after a couple hours, I start to get really itchy. And really itchy, like in these individual places in my face. Like, I just want to like scratch, right? And so we call this doctor in, this lovely young male, like just angelic, like earth angel sort of doctor that had been watching over me. And he comes in, he's like, what seems to be the issue? And I'm like, I'm so itchy right now. Like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, oh yeah, like your legs and your arms are itchy, because that can happen with the morphine. Like sometimes, like maybe we should, there might be something we can give you for that. I'm like, no, it's not my legs and my arms. It's my face. Like my face is so itchy. It was like, that's technically a good thing. Like, it's good to be itchy. That's a sign of healing. He's like, but it's really not time for that. That would be, I would expect you to start feeling that like maybe in 2 or 3 days or a week when the skin starts to heal, but you're still in trauma mode. And I don't think that that's really possible, that that's what you're feeling. He's like, but let's have a look. So he takes, the gauze off my face, and he's like, can I look in your eye? And he takes out this pen light, right? And he's, looking in my eye and having me move my eyes around. And he goes, that's very interesting. And I say, what's very interesting? He's like, I didn't tell you this when you came in because you were in shock and we were trying to manage the burn, but you had a pretty big black blister over your sclera. And the sclera is the white part of the eyeball, right? So, I had burned basically my eyelid off, like not entirely, but I burned the top layers of skin off my eyelid and had burned the inside of the white of my eye. And he couldn't see any sign of that burn in my eye. It was gone. So I said, come with me to the eye examination room. I just want to look through the machine and see, really get in there and see if I can find any evidence of it. So, okay. So he wheeled me across the hospital, 1 a.m. or whatnot, and got a good look into my eye and said, no, I don't see anything. And then he eye tested me and my eyes were working fine. And he said, wow, that's really strange. So he rolled me back to the triage room, and he was sitting there and he was thinking, he was doing his, Dr. Chin. And he said, I don't know how you feel about this, but I would be willing to release you into your own care and not make you go to the burn ward if you'll follow my directions to a T. He said, because something you're doing is helping you to heal really rapidly. And I don't want to impede on that. And I also think you might be more comfortable at home than at the hospital. And I said, yes, please send me home. I want to go home. I don't want to be in another hospital room. So, basically the instructions were I was not allowed to go into sunlight. I had to cover all of the windows in my apartment, of which there were 2. I had to cover all of the windows in the apartment with heavy blankets so that no light could get into the apartment. Any sort of sunlight would re-injure the burns. I was not allowed to go outside, and if I did go outside, I had to come back and immediately rinse all of the burns with Cetaphil, which is this really gentle cleaner, and try to get all the debris out. I was on a heavy regimen of cleaning and applying ointment, and I had a special ointment that I had to put inside my eye. And I had to go see an eye doctor every once a week for a while, although I only went once and I kind of had a fight with him and I didn't go back. And I had to go see a plastic surgeon on a regular basis also to monitor the scar tissue as it grew in. And then he basically told me, I need to be totally honest with you, you're never probably going to look the same. You're never going to be able to go out in public in the sun or out in the sun without a very large hat and a lot of sunscreen, because that part of your skin is always going to be sensitive to the sun. You're always going to burn there more easily. It's going to be a really, fragile place on your face. You have keloid scarring in other places, so it's very likely that you'll get keloid scarring on your face. And the plastic surgeon said the same thing. It was very likely I was going to need surgery at some point to deal with the scarring that was going to happen. So he said all that, and then he released me into my own care. And we went home and we did everything that they said. We covered all the windows with blankets and all this. We set me up a bed in the living room, put the futon couch down, and set up a bed with pillows all around it so that I was a belly sleeper at that point, so I wouldn't roll over onto my belly in the middle of the night. I had to sleep, learn how to sleep on my back. And I went into this heavy regimen of cleaning, which I included lavender oil in that regimen, which was not assigned by the hospital, but I think helped a lot. And basically what happened is I had 2 months of being in a hot cave in the middle of the summer in New York City, in my dark little cave of an apartment, and I was unable to do pretty much anything. With the goop in my eye, I couldn't read, I couldn't really watch TV. And so I ended up pretty much meditating for 2 months in my dark cave, not in a desert, but in New York, and having this really profound experience. And a lot of gateways opened for me at that time. A lot of astral projection started happening, and just having experiences with other beings that were walking through my door. The last thing I'll say about that experience, well, there's two last things. One is the first morning I was home and washing my face, I looked at myself in the mirror and, with this mangled face, and I looked in my eyes and I saw myself. I saw myself. And I started crying, and I came out of the bathroom, and Stasia said to me, "Oh my God, honey, it's gonna be okay. Like, you're gonna recover. It's gonna be okay. You're still beautiful." And I said, no, it's okay if it's not okay. I'm more beautiful than I've ever been because I can see myself here. Like, I saw myself beyond my face, right? So that was a huge moment of awakening, if you will. And the other thing is, this detour in the right direction sent me on my healing path. It was a couple months after that when my mother said, maybe you might consider following that path of being a healer, because clearly you have some capacity and some passion in that direction. And that's when I decided to go to massage therapy school. So massage therapy was absolutely the right gateway healing modality for me to be able to touch human bodies and heal human bodies hands-on, but also get to be with people and their process and their hearts and their journeys, and get to hear really intimate stories and start off my role as a facilitator, which happened just 2 years later when I got the call to move to Portland to meet my teacher, and met my teacher within 6 months and started my training as a facilitator. So, for the 13 or 14 years that I was a massage therapist, I was very honored with holding many, many people's bodies and stories and lives. And it has inspired me to now close my practice as a massage therapist, but open myself fully to working in this world with mentorship and counseling, and holding people's lives and their stories of awakening. Because this is the most profound, exciting, just inspiring stuff for me, and has been on my path. And so I hope it is for you too. I hope it's something that, hearing people's stories, hearing about these big, wiggy, weird things that people experience and how it sent them in a new direction that was more soul satisfying, I hope that is true for you as well. And I hope you'll join us each month on the 15th to hear a new conversation. And if you have a story to tell and you think that your story would make a great conversation with me for this series, please let me know. Private message me or comment here, and I would love, love, love to talk to you. We're going to have at least the next year full of different artists and practitioners and teachers and people who want to share their stories of awakening for the purpose of inspiring and bolstering our community, our larger global community. Okay, thank you guys so much for listening, and I love you all, and I hope you're having a fabulous January, and that you're starting to feel that fire of this new phase that we're in, and 2019 being this kickoff. So much respect and appreciation and honoring to you, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.